Was this the greatest defeat of all time? Battle of Cannae 216 BCE. By the summer of 216 BCE, Rome had grown from a small city into the most powerful force in the Mediterranean Sea area. The Roman army, known for its strict rules, matching equipment, and constant growth, had taken over all of Italy. They had defeated the Samnites, taken in the Etruscans, and even beaten Carthage, the greatest sea power of the time, in the First Punic War. Hannibal's ghost, the Carthaginian threat, returns to Italian soil. But now, a threat from that past victory had returned to Italian land. The Roman Republic, led by Consul Gaius Terentius Varro, had marched an incredibly large army of over 80,000 men into Apulia. Their goal was to completely destroy Hannibal Barca. Filled with confidence, they expected the Carthaginians to be easily crushed under the weight of Roman numbers. But before we see how Hannibal's trap worked, I want your opinion. If you were Consul Varro, seeing the enemy army in front of you, what would you do? Comment right now, full attack or hold the line. The Roman war machine, 700,000 strong and ready for battle. The Roman war machine had never been bigger. Polybius tells us that Rome could theoretically field 700,000 foot soldiers and 70,000 horse riders from its Italian allies, numbers that were far larger than any other power at that time. For this battle, they had gathered 8 legions plus equal numbers of allied forces, almost 90,000 men, the largest field army Rome had ever put together. Across the dusty plains stood Hannibal's army, smaller, more mixed, but toughened by years of campaigning and brilliant victories. Hannibal had shocked the ancient world by crossing the Alps and completely defeating Roman forces at Trebia and Lake Trasimene. Each victory had been a masterclass in clever fighting tactics. Hannibal's oath, the boy who swore eternal war against Rome. The son of Hamilcar Barca had been raised for this moment. As a boy of 9, he had sworn a sacred oath to never be a friend to Rome. This wasn't just childhood drama, it was family programming. His father's anger over the First Punic War had created a household devoted to revenge. Now that boy had become a general of extraordinary talent, with piercing eyes that seemed to look into the soul, as Polybius described. Alpine crossing, Hannibal's impossible march that shocked the world. Roman citizens spoke of Hannibal in hushed tones, a monster who had accomplished the impossible. The Alpine crossing alone, which cost him 40,000 men and most of his elephants, had been carefully planned with detailed knowledge about mountain passes, weather patterns, and local tribal politics. The sacrifice was thought necessary to achieve surprise, and surprise he did. But Rome had adapted. After suffering defeats, they had appointed Fabius Maximus as dictator. His strategy was simple but effective: avoid big battles while harassing Hannibal's food-gathering parties, denying supplies through burned earth tactics, and preventing alliances from breaking away. Fabian's strategy, Rome's controversial delay and harass tactics. The strategy worked, but to the Roman public, it appeared cowardly. By 216 BCE, political pressure in Rome reached a breaking point. Political pressure, Varro's rise and the demand for aggressive action. Varro was elected consul on a platform of aggressive action, promising to end Hannibal's Italian adventure with one decisive blow. The Senate authorized an enormous army and issued what amounted to a simple command: seek battle and destroy the enemy. Varro, a man of common birth, unusual for consulship in this period, had built his political career appealing to popular assemblies while criticizing senatorial caution. His military experience was limited to minor commands in Gaul. He had never faced an enemy like Hannibal or commanded more than 2 legions. But what he lacked in experience, he made up for in confidence. Clash of consuls, Varro's populism versus Paulus's caution. His co-consul, Lucius Aemilius Paulus, represented the aristocratic establishment. A veteran of Illyrian campaigns, Paulus understood irregular warfare and approached Hannibal with caution. But he couldn't openly oppose the Senate's orders or appear cowardly before the Roman public. This clash of approaches would prove fatal. Hannibal, understanding Roman psychology better than the Romans themselves, saw opportunity in their pride. He deliberately positioned his army near the grain storage buildings of Cannae, creating pressure that would force a Roman response. As the August sun rose over Apulia, the limestone plains baked beneath a merciless heat. Hannibal's deployment appeared almost insulting in its vulnerability. His center, made up mainly of Celtic warriors, stuck out toward the Romans like a deliberate challenge. It was bait, and Varro was eager to take it. The stage was set. The Romans saw an easy victory, but Hannibal had just begun a deadly game of chess where the pieces were made of flesh and blood. To see how this trap was sprung, subscribe to Dark History class. The summer of 216 BCE found Rome boiling with rage and shame. For 2 years, Hannibal Barca had made fools of their generals, slaughtered their legions, and roamed freely across Italian soil, an insult no Roman could stomach. The disaster at Lake Trasimene still burned in the group memory. An entire consular army had been ambushed and butchered, with 15,000 Romans cut down in a single morning. The consul Gaius Flaminius himself had died there. His body was never recovered from the bloody waters. Rome had never known such shame. Never in the Republic's history, whispered citizens in the Forum, has a foreign enemy operated freely on Italian soil for extended periods. Roman identity itself was built on aggressive expansion and fighting skill. Now that identity lay shattered beneath Carthaginian boots. The Roman Senate's response was characteristically Roman, overwhelming force. If Hannibal had beaten 2 legions, then 8 would crush him. If his cavalry had outmaneuvered theirs, then they would field twice as many horsemen. If his tactics were superior, they would drown his genius in a sea of Roman steel. Rome's response was staggering in size. Instead of the normal consular armies of 2 legions each, the Senate authorized 8 legions plus equal numbers of allied forces, approximately 90,000 men. Polybius describes it as the most perfect military organization ever created, with its maniple system allowing unprecedented tactical flexibility while maintaining rigid command structure. The manipular system, Rome's revolutionary military innovation. The manipular system was Rome's greatest military innovation. Unlike the Greek phalanx, which fought as a single rigid mass, Roman legions deployed in 3 distinct lines. The hostati, youngest soldiers in front, the principes, experienced men in the second line, and the triarii, veterans in reserve. Each line was further divided into maniples, small, flexible units that could move independently while maintaining overall formation integrity. This checkerboard spacing allowed fresh troops to move forward through gaps when frontline soldiers tired. Each Roman soldier was a cog in this magnificent machine. Their equipment was standardized to perfection: the large rectangular scutum shield, the deadly pilum javelin designed to bend on impact and make enemy shields useless, the short gladius sword for stabbing in close formation. Their training emphasized unity, discipline, and what Livy termed disciplina, a concept meaning not just military discipline, but civic duty and moral uprightness. This was the Roman way of war: methodical, overwhelming, and relentless. For centuries, it had proven unbeatable against diverse enemies. Each defeat simply spurred greater mobilization, more legions, more allies, until resistance became impossible. As Pyrrhus of Epirus had famously remarked after a costly victory, "Another such victory against the Romans, and we are undone." In Rome, the mood was vengeful. Shops displayed crude dolls of Hannibal, some showing him as half-beast. Mothers frightened children with tales of the Carthaginian monster who ate Roman soldiers. In taverns, citizens who had never held a sword explained confidently how Hannibal should be defeated. "Cut off his supplies," shouted one merchant. "Burn the countryside before him," suggested another. "No, force him to battle with our full strength," declared a third to general approval. The frustration with Fabius Maximus's strategy of delay and harassment had reached a breaking point. His approach, avoiding big battles while denying Hannibal supplies through burned earth tactics, was working, but too slowly for Roman pride. They mockingly called him cunctator, the delayer, and whispered that he lacked courage. But who would command this mighty force? The consular elections of 216 BCE reflected the public mood. Romans wanted blood, Carthaginian blood, and they elected men who would deliver it. Gaius Terentius Varro emerged as the people's champion. Born to common stock, unusual for the consulship in this period, Varro had built his political career by appealing to the popular assemblies while criticizing senatorial caution. He campaigned on a simple promise: seek Hannibal out and destroy him in a single decisive battle. We have the men. We have the resources. What we lack is the courage to use them. His speeches in the Forum Romanum drew thunderous applause. His platform was simple: raise the largest army in Roman history and crush Hannibal in a single decisive battle. The alternative, continued harassment while avoiding engagement, appeared defeatist to a culture that equated military glory with civic virtue. Romans didn't want another year of Hannibal burning farms and tempting allies to switch sides. They wanted victory, total and immediate. The aristocrats of the Senate viewed Varro with thinly veiled contempt. His military experience was limited to minor commands in Gaul. He had never faced a major enemy or commanded more than 2 legions. His understanding of warfare was theoretical, based on traditional Roman tactical manuals rather than practical experience. One senator was overheard in a private dining room: "Varro knows politics, not war. He'll lead us to disaster." But such concerns remained private. Publicly, the Senate supported the war effort with unprecedented resources. As balance to Varro's fiery populism, they supported Lucius Aemilius Paulus for the second consulship. A veteran of the Illyrian campaigns, Paulus understood irregular warfare and enemy psychology. His consulship in 219 BCE had been successful, suggesting competent, if not brilliant, leadership. When he spoke in the Senate, his words carried the weight of experience. We must not underestimate this enemy. Hannibal does not fight as we do. He seeks not to meet our strength, but to turn it against us. Paulus had studied reports of Hannibal's victories at Trebia and Trasimene. At the Trebia River, Hannibal had used hidden forces and a fake retreat to lure the Romans into a devastating ambush. At Lake Trasimene, he had positioned his entire army in morning fog along a narrow road, springing a trap that left no escape. Each defeat showed not just tactical brilliance but deep understanding of Roman psychology. Hannibal consistently exploited Roman aggression and predictability. But few wanted to hear caution. The Roman people demanded action. As spring turned to summer, Rome's forces gathered. The scale was unprecedented: 80,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry. Young men flocked to the standards, eager to be part of the force that would rid Italy of Hannibal. Centurions drilled their men relentlessly, turning farmers and craftsmen into the most disciplined fighting force the world had ever seen. The sound of training filled the air: the rhythmic clash of wooden practice swords, the grunt of men in mock combat, the shout of centurions correcting formations. The smell of sweat, leather, and metal filled the camps. Blacksmiths worked day and night repairing equipment, sharpening blades, and mending armor. The army's very size seemed to guarantee victory. How could any general, even one as brilliant as Hannibal, defeat such overwhelming numbers? Roman war planning was based on sound historical precedent. Overwhelming force concentration had worked against Pyrrhus, the Samnites, and Carthage itself in the First Punic War. Each Roman soldier carried approximately 60 pounds of equipment: helmet, armor, shield, weapons, rations. The legions moved as one great organism, their supply trains extending for miles. Engineers marched with them, ready to build bridges, fortifications, and siege equipment. This wasn't just an army, it was Roman civilization on the march. Paulus watched the preparations with growing unease. Something about the confidence surrounding him felt hollow. He had studied reports of Hannibal's previous victories, how the Carthaginian had systematically exploited Roman aggression. But his concerns fell on deaf ears. "We will crush him with our numbers," the other officers assured him. "He cannot stand against 8 legions." Paulus had tried to explain the differences in cavalry strength. Hannibal's Numidian light horsemen and Celtic heavy cavalry were superior both in number and quality to Rome's mounted forces. But cavalry had never been decisive in Roman warfare before. Infantry won battles, and Rome had infantry to spare. Varro, meanwhile, relished his moment. Standing before the assembled legions, he promised glory and vengeance. "Men of Rome, for too long this Carthaginian dog has ravaged our lands and slaughtered our brothers. The time for patience is over. The time for half measures is done. When we meet Hannibal, we will erase the shame of Trasimene and Trebia. We will show him what it means to face the full might of Rome. The roar of approval echoed across the plain, 80,000 throats crying for victory. But in the shadows, doubt lingered. Older veterans who had faced Hannibal before exchanged knowing glances. They remembered how quickly victory had turned to slaughter, how the Carthaginians seemed to read Roman minds, anticipating their every move. "He's different," one veteran centurion told his younger colleague. "He doesn't fight like the Gauls or the Greeks. He fights like something else entirely." August heat, the brutal Apulian environment that shaped the battle. By early August, the two consular armies had united in Apulia, forming the largest Roman field force ever assembled. The summer heat bore down mercilessly as they marched southeastward, following reports of Hannibal's movements. The great war machine moved slowly, its very size making rapid movement impossible. 8 legions and their allies stretched for miles across the dusty landscape, raising clouds of dust visible from horizon to horizon. The heat was brutal. Men marched in full armor under a Mediterranean sun that showed no mercy. Water became precious, with soldiers rationing their supplies between rivers and wells. The land itself seemed hostile. Apulia in August is a harsh environment. The limestone soil baked hard, sparse vegetation withered under relentless sun, and temperatures regularly exceeded 35 degrees Celsius, 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Men collapsed from heat exhaustion even without combat, and the medical corps worked constantly to keep the army functional. Intelligence reports arrived daily. Hannibal had seized the Roman supply depot at Cannae, a small town nestled near the Aufidus River. The granaries there held critical supplies for the region. This seizure created pressure requiring a Roman response. By capturing Cannae's granaries, Hannibal demonstrated Carthaginian capability while forcing Romans into a tactical situation of his choosing. Evidence suggests Hannibal possessed detailed knowledge of Roman tactical doctrine through Italian allies providing military intelligence, deserters from Roman service, and observation during previous battles. His selection of Cannae as the battlefield revealed his understanding of Roman psychology and tactical limitations. In the command tent, tension crackled between the consuls. "He's baiting us," Paulus argued, pointing to the map. "This position suits his cavalry. The open terrain gives his Numidian horsemen room to move. The river limits our deployment options. He's choosing the ground carefully." Varro dismissed the concern with a wave. "Let him choose the ground. Our numbers make the terrain irrelevant. We will crush his center with our infantry mass, then roll up his wings." "That's exactly what he expects," Paulus countered. "Remember Trebia? Remember Trasimene? Each time we attacked exactly as he anticipated." "Those were smaller forces," Varro insisted. "This is different. We have 8 legions. And he has the same mind that destroyed our previous armies. Numbers alone won't save us if we're outthought." Roman tactical doctrine emphasized aggressive forward movement, breaking enemy formations through sustained pressure. This approach had proven successful against phalanx-based armies and barbarian masses. Why would Hannibal be different? The argument ended in stalemate, with Varro's final words hanging in the air. "Tomorrow we will see whose strategy is correct." Among the legionaries, confidence remained high. Veterans told new recruits stories of past Roman victories, of how discipline always prevailed over barbarian cunning. The newer soldiers listened wide-eyed, eager for their chance at glory. "Hannibal's men are tired," one centurion assured his troops. "They've been marching across Italy for 2 years. No reinforcements, living off the land. We're fresh, well supplied, and twice their number." Another added, "Their army is a mix of Gauls, Spaniards, Africans. They barely speak the same language. How can they coordinate against our disciplined maniples?" What these men didn't know, what Roman intelligence had failed to appreciate, was that Hannibal's multinational army represented not weakness but strength. The diversity provided tactical flexibility and specialized capabilities. The Romans saw diversity as weakness, communication problems, divided loyalties, rather than strength, tactical flexibility, specialized capabilities. The Celtic warriors provided ferocity and intimidation. The Spanish infantry offered discipline and their deadly falcata swords. The African troops brought professional soldiering with captured Roman equipment. The Numidian cavalry provided unmatched mobility and harassment capabilities. Each component had its role in Hannibal's symphony of destruction. The peculiar command structure of the Roman army added another layer of vulnerability. The two consuls were to alternate daily command, a political necessity that created tactical complications. On one day, Paulus would command, urging caution. The next, Varro would push for aggression. "This system is madness against an opponent like Hannibal," Paulus confided to a trusted officer. "We need unified strategy, not this political compromise." "It is the Roman way," the officer replied with a shrug. Two consuls, alternating command. Against Hannibal, the Roman way may be our undoing. By August 1st, the Roman army had established a camp about 6 miles from Hannibal's position. Paulus, holding command that day, ordered reconnaissance but avoided full engagement. "Tomorrow is soon enough," he told his officers. "Let the men rest. Let our scouts report on the terrain and the enemy's disposition." But the next day would be Varro's turn to command. August 2nd, 216 BCE, dawned clear and hot. By 6 a.m., the temperature was already rising rapidly from the cool dawn toward what promised to be a scorching midday. The camp stirred to life with routine efficiency. Men ate quickly, checked equipment, and formed into units. The air filled with a metallic scent of armor being donned, the leather smell of shields and belts, and the dust kicked up by thousands of moving feet. Varro rose before dawn, his mind set. Today would be his day of glory, the day he would destroy Hannibal and secure his place in Roman history. He ordered the army to break camp and advance immediately. The tribunes exchanged glances but complied. Orders went out, and the great machine began to move. Paulus made one final attempt to urge caution. "The men are tired from yesterday's march. The heat will be brutal today. Let us wait. Choose our moment." Varro's response was cutting. "I did not come here to hide behind ditches like Fabius. I came to fight. Today we fight." "Hannibal is no common enemy," Paulus persisted. "He wants us to attack. That should give us pause." "Of course he wants us to attack. What choice does he have? His army is half our size. Delaying only plays into his hands, giving him time to find some new trick. We will smash through his center before he can respond." Paulus fell silent. The decision was made. As a patrician consul, he represented senatorial dignity against popular pressure. His caution regarding Hannibal reflected strategic wisdom but appeared cowardly to Roman public opinion shaped by centuries of military success. He couldn't oppose direct senatorial orders or appear to lack courage before the men. The Roman army deployed in traditional fashion but with modifications reflecting their numerical superiority. Instead of standard maniple spacing, the legions compressed their formations to maximize frontal pressure. Polybius describes the deployment. "The Romans made their line much deeper than usual, the depth being double the front. 90,000 Roman and allied soldiers arranged in gleaming ranks, their bronze armor catching the early sunlight. The standardization was magnificent and terrifying: identical shields, identical javelins, identical short swords. The Roman battle line stretched nearly 2 miles, a metallic wall of disciplined humanity. The low murmur of 90,000 men making final preparations filled the air: armor adjustments, weapon checks, whispered prayers to Mars. Roman military efficiency was audible: centurions' commands, standard bearers' positioning, the rhythmic clash of equipment being readied. Dust, sweat, leather, and bronze, the metallic scent of weapons mixed with human anxiety. Horses and mules contributed their own odor, while morning cooking fires added wood smoke to the sensory mixture. Hannibal's bait, the deliberate weakness that lured Rome in. Across the field, Hannibal's deployment appeared almost insulting in its apparent weakness. His center consisted of Celtic and Spanish infantry arranged in a convex formation, actually sticking out toward the Romans like a deliberate challenge. The Celtic warriors, approximately 20,000 Gallic fighters, many stripped to the waist in their traditional manner, wielded long swords and oval shields. Their appearance was psychologically intimidating. Painted bodies, elaborate mustaches, golden torques around their necks. They shouted insults across the field, beating their swords against shields. The Spanish infantry positioned alongside the Celts represented Carthaginian military evolution. They carried captured Roman equipment mixed with traditional Spanish weapons, the famous falcata sword, small round shields, cetra, and javelins designed for both throwing and thrusting. But the hidden strength of Hannibal's formation went unnoticed by Roman commanders. On each flank, masked by lighter troops, stood Hannibal's African infantry. These were professional soldiers equipped with armor and weapons captured from previous victories. At a distance, they appeared identical to Roman legionaries, a crucial element of Hannibal's deception. Even more concerning was Hannibal's cavalry deployment. On his left wing, Numidian light horse under Maharbal, approximately 4,000 riders on small, agile mounts. On the right, Celtic and Spanish heavy cavalry, roughly 6,000 horsemen on larger war horses. Together, they outnumbered Roman cavalry almost 2:1. This apparent vulnerability seemed to confirm every Roman expectation. The barbarians were offering themselves for slaughter. Paulus, seeing the deployment, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Something was wrong. The formation was too obviously weak, too inviting. But Varro saw only the opportunity he had dreamed of. "Sound the advance," Varro ordered. Full attack across the line. Roman trumpets blared the advance. 80,000 infantry began moving forward in perfect coordination, their hobnailed sandals, caligae, creating a rhythmic thunder on the hard-packed earth. Livy's description echoes across the centuries. The Romans advanced with such confidence that they seemed not to be going to battle, but to the slaughter of their enemies. The die was cast. Varro had committed Rome to a decisive fight on his terms. But to achieve the victory he so desperately craved, his legions would have to march directly into the mouth of Hannibal's perfect trap. Dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of gold and crimson as nearly 200,000 men prepared to kill one another. August 2nd, 216 BCE, a date that would soon be burned into Roman consciousness as the blackest day in their history. The battlefield, a stretch of flat, dusty ground near the Aufidus River, lay silent for one final moment. Then came the horns. Roman trumpets sounded the advance, their brassy notes carrying across the plain. 80,000 infantry began moving forward in perfect coordination, their hobnailed sandals creating a rhythmic thunder on the hard-packed earth. Step, step, step. The sound itself was a weapon, the unstoppable approach of Roman discipline, as methodical as death. From above, the Roman advance resembled a great rectangle of bronze and red moving as one organism across the dusty plain. The compressed formations, deeper than Roman armies typically deployed, created a phalanx of unprecedented mass. The front stretched nearly 2 miles but compressed unusually deep, with each man having less space than normal. Varro's tactic was simple. Overwhelming frontal pressure would smash through Hannibal's center through sheer weight of numbers. In the front ranks, the hastati, youngest Roman soldiers, gripped their pilum javelins with white knuckles. Behind them, the principes, seasoned veterans, checked their formations, ready to exploit any breakthrough. In the third line, the triarii, the oldest and most experienced soldiers, watched with the cold eyes of men who had seen everything war could offer. Forward! Maintain formation! Centurions barked orders, their vinewood staffs tapping shields back into alignment, keeping the unstoppable advance uniform and relentless. The ground itself seemed to tremble beneath this juggernaut. As they advanced, enormous dust clouds arose from the limestone soil baked hard by summer heat. The fine particles coated throats and nostrils, making each breath a little harder, each step a little more draining in the growing heat. Atop a small rise, Hannibal Barca watched the Roman advance with the detached interest of a scientist observing an experiment whose outcome he already knew. Polybius described him with piercing eyes that seemed to penetrate the soul. And in this moment, those eyes saw exactly what he had anticipated, Roman arrogance walking directly into his trap. "They come just as expected," he remarked to Maharbal, his cavalry commander. "See how they have compressed their lines? They create our opportunity for us." Beside him, his officers, a multinational collection of Carthaginians, Spaniards, Gauls, and Africans, watched in silence as Hannibal calmly issued orders. Unlike the Romans, whose commands followed rigid protocol, Hannibal's instructions flowed in multiple languages, tailored to each contingent's unique capabilities. Hannibal's deployment appeared almost insulting in its apparent weakness. His center consisted of Celtic and Spanish infantry arranged in a convex formation, actually sticking out toward the Romans like a deliberate challenge. Unlike the rigid Roman formation, Hannibal's battle line pulsed with controlled chaos. The Celtic warriors, approximately 20,000 Gallic fighters, formed the central bulge. Many stood stripped to the waist in their traditional manner, their torsos painted with woad patterns, golden torques gleaming around their necks. Their long swords and oval shields contrasted sharply with the standardization of the Roman equipment. Spanish infantry positioned alongside the Celts represented Carthaginian military evolution, a fusion of captured Roman equipment with traditional Spanish weapons. The deadly falcata sword, with its forward curve designed for devastating slashes, would prove particularly effective in the close-quarters fighting to come. But the hidden strength of Hannibal's formation remained invisible to Roman eyes. On each flank, masked by terrain and lighter troops, stood Hannibal's African infantry. These were professional soldiers equipped with armor and weapons captured from previous victories. At a distance, they appeared identical to Roman legionaries, a crucial element of Hannibal's deception. Most dangerous of all was Hannibal's cavalry deployment. On the left wing, Numidian light horse under Maharbal, approximately 4,000 riders on small, agile mounts, without saddles or bridles, controlling their horses with just knee pressure and a small neck rope. On the right wing, Celtic and Spanish heavy cavalry, roughly 6,000 horsemen on larger war horses, their armor gleaming in the morning sun. Together, they outnumbered Roman cavalry by almost 2:1. And unlike Roman horsemen, primarily wealthy citizens with limited military training, these were professional warriors who lived and died on horseback. As the Roman juggernaut advanced, the morning heat began to intensify. By 8 a.m., temperatures were already climbing toward what would become a brutally hot day, even by Mediterranean standards. Modern military analysis suggests these weather conditions significantly influenced the battle's outcome. The Romans advanced with methodical confidence. Their formations had conquered the known world. Their discipline was legendary. Their equipment was standardized to perfection. What could possibly stand against them? "The enemy center begins to waver already," one tribune commented to Varro. "See how their line bulges? They fear our advance." Varro nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "They should fear us. Today, Rome takes its vengeance." What neither understood was that the bulge in Hannibal's line was deliberate, a calculated vulnerability designed to draw the Romans forward into a tactical embrace that would become a death grip. At 30 yards, the Roman front line halted momentarily. "Release Pila," came the command, and thousands of javelins arced through the air toward the Carthaginian center. The distinctive whistle of these weapons, designed with soft iron necks that bent on impact to make enemy shields useless, filled the air. The Celtic warriors took significant casualties but held their line. This was expected. They were chosen for the center precisely because they could absorb punishment while maintaining unity. "Draw swords." The Roman front rank pulled their gladii from scabbards with a collective rasp of metal on leather. "Advance." The final approach began. No more missiles now. This would be the hand-to-hand butchery at which Romans excelled. The gladius was designed for stabbing in tight formation, slipping between ribs or into throats with brutal efficiency. Roman training emphasized collective action over individual heroism, each man protecting his comrade's flanks while attacking the enemy before him. The lines crashed together with a distinctive sound of ancient battle. The thud of shields, the clash of metal, the grunts of effort, and the screams of the wounded. But something unexpected happened. Instead of collapsing under the Roman pressure, the Celtic center absorbed the impact, then began a controlled fighting withdrawal. This was no rout. The Celtic warriors were executing Hannibal's precise instructions: resist initially, then gradually yield ground, drawing the eager Romans deeper into the trap. Their long swords required more fighting space than Roman weapons, so they deliberately opened distance, tempting the Romans to pursue. They retreat. Roman officers called out, "Press the advantage. Follow them." To Roman commanders, this appeared to validate their tactical superiority. Barbarian courage was no match for Roman discipline. The slight disorder in the Carthaginian center seemed proof that victory was within grasp. As the Romans pushed forward, their formation began to change. The maniple system was designed for flexibility, but in their eagerness to exploit apparent success, the legionaries compressed their lines, gradually creating a wedge-shaped mass pushing into the Carthaginian center. Polybius describes what happened. The Romans followed up their success and kept pressing forward, gradually getting into disorder as they pursued the retreating enemy. Roman soldiers in the center felt themselves pushed forward by comrades behind them, while those on the wings found themselves being drawn inward. The orderly checkerboard formation began to transform into a dense, unwieldy mass, exactly as Hannibal had planned. By mid-morning, around 10 a.m., the temperature had risen dramatically, approaching 30 degrees Celsius, 86 degrees Fahrenheit. For men fighting in bronze helmets and body armor, the heat was debilitating. Every movement became harder, every breath more labored. Sweat poured down faces, stinging eyes and making equipment slippery. Here, the Roman advantage of standardized equipment became a liability. Their bronze armor and large shields provided excellent protection but trapped heat against the body. The densely packed formation prevented air circulation, creating a mass of overheating men pushing steadily forward. Carthaginian forces, particularly those from Africa and Spain, were better adapted to extreme heat. Their equipment was generally lighter. Their more flexible formations allowed better air circulation. They had superior water discipline and heat management. As the battle progressed, these differences would prove decisive. The grinding advance continued for nearly 2 hours. To the Romans, victory seemed inevitable. They were pushing the enemy back, maintaining unity, and inflicting casualties. But with each step forward, each yard gained, they moved deeper into Hannibal's trap. The trap springs. African infantry reveals Hannibal's master plan. Around 11:30 a.m., with temperatures approaching 35 degrees Celsius, 95 degrees Fahrenheit, the battle reached its pivotal moment. The Roman center had advanced nearly half a mile, driving deep into what appeared to be a collapsing Carthaginian line. The Celtic and Spanish infantry continued their controlled withdrawal, maintaining just enough resistance to keep the Romans committed to frontal assault. Varro, watching from his position with the cavalry on the right wing, felt triumph welling in his chest. "We have them. Their center cannot hold much longer." But something was happening on the flanks, something the Romans had failed to anticipate. With Roman forces deeply committed to pursuing the retreating center, Hannibal sprang his trap. The African infantry, concealed on both flanks, wheeled inward in perfect coordination, attacking the Roman flanks with captured Roman weapons and tactics. The tactical execution was extraordinary. These troops had to ignore the battle raging in front of them, maintain perfect formation while rotating 90 degrees, then attack in coordination with cavalry sweeping around both flanks. This complex maneuver required exceptional discipline and precise timing. The moment of realization came for Roman soldiers as they suddenly found themselves fighting opponents who looked and fought exactly like themselves. Africans wearing captured Roman armor, carrying captured Roman weapons, using captured Roman tactics. The psychological impact was devastating. "They're behind us. We're flanked. Hold formation." Confusion spread through Roman ranks as soldiers tried to understand how enemies had appeared on their vulnerable flanks. The African infantry pressed inward like the jaws of a vice, squeezing the Roman mass from both sides. Simultaneously, the cavalry battle on both wings reached its conclusion with devastating results for Rome. On the left wing, Maharbal's Numidian cavalry had engaged and quickly defeated the Roman horsemen. These light horsemen, riding without saddles or bridles, demonstrated the mobility that made them legendary throughout the ancient world. After routing the Roman cavalry, they swept around to attack the Roman rear. On the right wing, Celtic and Spanish heavy cavalry crushed their Roman opponents through superior numbers and better tactical coordination. Hasdrubal, commanding this wing, showed brilliant initiative. After defeating the Roman right, he led his cavalry all the way around the battlefield to strike the remaining Roman cavalry from behind. Complete encirclement, Rome's greatest army becomes trapped. The encirclement was complete. By noon, Roman forces found themselves completely surrounded. What had begun as a confident advance had become a desperate fight for survival. The hunters had become the hunted. Varro, seeing the disaster unfolding, managed to escape with approximately 70 horsemen, a decision that would save his life but doom his historical reputation. His co-consul Paulus, wounded early in the fighting, made the fateful decision to die with his men rather than flee. For the encircled Romans, the tactical situation worsened with terrifying speed. The very depth of their formation, intended as a strength, became a fatal weakness. As pressure increased from all sides, the Roman army compressed into an ever tighter mass. The physical reality was nightmarish. Roman legions designed for flexible movement found themselves compressed into dense masses. Individual soldiers had barely room to swing their swords, while rear ranks pushed forward, creating dangerous overcrowding. A Roman soldier's testimony, preserved in fragments, describes the horror. We could not raise our arms to strike. We could not step back to create fighting space. We were pressed so tightly, I felt my ribs would crack. Men died standing because there was no room to fall. The compression effect became lethal. Roman formations became so dense that many soldiers couldn't use their weapons effectively. Rear ranks pushed forward while front ranks had nowhere to go, creating crushing pressure that killed as efficiently as enemy weapons. Men suffocated, crushed by the weight of their own army. Heat exhaustion became a major factor. Roman soldiers in full armor, packed closely together, began collapsing from hyperthermia even without wounds. Water supplies were cut off, making dehydration critical. Some men drank from puddles of blood in desperation. According to later accounts, the noise became overwhelming. Clashing metal, screaming wounded, shouted commands in multiple languages, horses' hooves, and the peculiar sound of 100,000 men fighting for their lives in increasingly confined space. Visual chaos enveloped the battlefield. Dust clouds obscured much of the fighting. Roman standards, normally visible coordination points, disappeared in the haze. Soldiers couldn't see beyond their immediate surroundings, making tactical assessment impossible. From his vantage point, Hannibal watched his masterpiece unfold. The double envelopment, known to classical warfare but never before executed successfully against a disciplined professional army, was working perfectly. His multinational forces, speaking different languages and fighting with different weapons, moved together in deadly harmony. "Now we harvest," he said quietly to his officers. The slaughter, 70,000 Romans die in history's most efficient battle. The battle's final phase was less tactical maneuver than systematic slaughter. Romans compressed into dense masses with no retreat possible could only fight and die where they stood. From noon until approximately 3 p.m., the killing continued under the brutal summer sun. Carthaginian forces, still organized and disciplined, methodically finished off Roman survivors. Hannibal had trained his men to aim for the unprotected parts of Roman armor: the armpit, the groin, the back of the knee. Each stroke was calculated to kill quickly and efficiently. The field itself became an obstacle: square miles of corpses, Roman equipment, and Carthaginian plunder. The limestone soil, baked hard by heat, was now muddy with blood. Men slipped and fell on entrails and severed limbs. The smell of death, blood, excrement, and ruptured bowels, hung thick in the air. Some Romans, in final desperation, attempted to bury their heads in the dirt to escape suffocation in the crush or to avoid witnessing the slaughter of their comrades. Livy reports that several thousand attempted this, only to be executed methodically by Carthaginian troops. Consul Paulus fought to the end. Found among piles of Roman dead, he had fought to the last, his body covered with wounds and surrounded by the bodies of his bodyguard, men who chose death over dishonor. By late afternoon, it was over. The silence that followed was almost as terrible as the battle's noise. Just the groans of the dying and the methodical sound of Carthaginian soldiers delivering mercy strokes or executing prisoners. The statistics defy belief. Of 86,000 Roman and Allied infantry, approximately 70,000 lay dead on the field. Carthaginian losses were roughly 6,000, a kill ratio of more than 10 to 1, unprecedented in ancient warfare. As the sun set on August 2, Cannae presented a scene unparalleled in ancient warfare. Polybius, writing from later accounts, struggled to convey the magnitude. Never before had so many Roman citizens perished in a single day. The legions had advanced right into the jaws of the trap. Now surrounded and compressed, the greatest army in Roman history had been methodically erased. The battle was over. The slaughter was just beginning. Aftermath and legacy: how Rome's defeat forged an empire. As twilight fell over Cannae, an eerie silence replaced the day's chaos. Where 170,000 men had clashed in fury, now only the moans of the dying broke the quiet. The field of battle had become a monument to slaughter on an unprecedented scale. The counting began at dawn. Hannibal's soldiers methodically stripped Roman corpses, gathering equipment and confirming casualties. Each removed ring finger, Romans wore distinctive citizenship rings, represented not just a death but the destruction of Roman political identity. The numbers defied belief: 70,000 Roman and Allied dead, 10,000 more taken prisoner. The cream of Roman manhood, senators, knights, tribunes and centurions, lay rotting under the Apulian sun. Among them, Consul Lucius Aemilius Paulus, who chose to die with his men rather than flee in disgrace. Polybius would later write, "The ground was covered with blood and corpses and presented a dreadful spectacle even to the enemy. Bodies lay so thick that later Romans claimed you could walk across the battlefield without touching ground. Summer heat accelerated decomposition, creating a stench that carried for miles. Carthaginian soldiers covered their faces with cloth as they worked. Carrion birds gathered in such numbers they darkened the sky, creating their own ecosystem of death. In his command tent, Hannibal received congratulations from his officers. The victory was complete beyond even his expectations. Roman military power had been shattered in a single afternoon. The road to Rome itself lay open. Maharbal's warning, the famous quote that changed history. It was then that Maharbal, commander of the Numidian cavalry, made his famous appeal: "Let me advance immediately with the cavalry. In 5 days you shall dine in the capital." Hannibal, exhausted from battle and perhaps stunned by his own success, replied, "I need time to think about it." Maharbal's response echoed through history: "You know how to win a battle, Hannibal, but you do not know how to use the victory." This moment, this hesitation, would be debated for centuries. The strategic window created by Cannae would never reopen. Rome, given time to recover, would never again risk everything in a single battle. Meanwhile, Consul Varro's journey back to Rome became a passage through national trauma. Villages emptied at his approach. Farmers abandoned fields. The news he carried was too terrible to be believed. When word reached Rome on August 4, panic erupted. Citizens fled the city, fearing Hannibal's imminent arrival. Markets closed, public buildings emptied. Some senators reportedly prepared for exile. The very foundations of the Republic seemed to crumble. Rome's resilience, the Senate's defiance that saved the Republic. But what happened next would change history's course. Rome did not surrender. Instead, something remarkable happened. The Senate met the very day news arrived, passed emergency measures, and appointed Marcus Junius Pera as dictator with extraordinary powers. Livy records the Senate's declaration: "We shall fight on." Rome does not treat for peace while enemy armies stand on Italian soil. This defiance, born of desperation, revealed the true strength of Rome, not its legions but its institutional resilience. While Hannibal had mastered tactics, Rome mastered the greater art of strategic endurance. The Republic implemented a radical transformation: abandonment of seeking decisive battle, adoption of Fabian tactics, harassment and attrition, improved intelligence gathering, better coordination between multiple armies. Paradoxically, Cannae's very completeness ensured Carthaginian defeat. The massacre's scale convinced Romans that Carthage sought their complete destruction, making any negotiated settlement politically impossible. Hannibal had won too thoroughly. His tactical masterpiece produced the opposite of its intended effect. Instead of forcing Rome to negotiate, it triggered total war mobilization that proved unstoppable. Hannibal expected Cannae to demonstrate Roman vulnerability. Instead, it revealed Roman determination. Ultimate irony: how Hannibal's victory doomed Carthage. The ultimate irony of Cannae lies in how Rome's eventual victory incorporated lessons learned from Hannibal himself. The republic that Hannibal nearly destroyed ultimately adopted his strategic and tactical innovations. When Scipio Africanus eventually defeated Carthage, he used tactics inspired by Hannibal's own methods. Rome's adaptation of cavalry warfare, flexible formations, and multinational armies all stemmed from the harsh lessons of Cannae. 2 millennia later, military academies still study Hannibal's tactical masterpiece, while political scientists analyze Rome's institutional resilience. Both lessons remain relevant. The search for decisive victory continues to inspire military commanders, while the importance of systemic advantages shapes strategic planning. Cannae teaches us that history's greatest battles are often those that fail to achieve their objectives, forcing historical development along unexpected paths. Hannibal's masterpiece doomed Carthage to destruction while creating the Roman Empire that would dominate the Mediterranean for centuries. The story of Cannae is more than a tale of military genius, it's a timeless lesson in the perils of pride. For more stories of empires and their fatal flaws, subscribe and turn on notifications. The past is waiting to be remembered.